Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
All right, let's dive in, folks. Today we're exploring a theory, a question, really. Could MKUltra still be active today?
That's a good question.
And to help us with this, we're going to look at an interview with a Kevin Shipp. He's a former CIA officer turned whistleblower.
Yeah.
So I think he's got a pretty unique perspective on this whole thing.
He does, yeah. He spent over 20 years with the agency.
Wow. Okay,
in a variety of different positions. So he's seen a lot. He's been there and done that.
So this is going to be pretty interesting. Now,
Yeah.
just to give everybody a taste of what we're going to be getting into, Shipp believes that MKUltra may have played a role in events like the JFK assassination,
Right.
MLK's assassination, the Oklahoma City bombing, and even 9/11.
Yeah. Those are some pretty big claims right there.
Those are huge claims.
Yeah.
So we're going to try to unpack all that. Now, as always, we're approaching this with an open mind. We're not necessarily endorsing everything Shipp says.
Right.
But we do think it's important to, kind of consider his perspective
To hear what he has to say.
and see where it leads us.
Exactly.
All right, so who is this Kevin Shipp guy?
So Kevin Shipp has a pretty fascinating background. He started out actually as a biologist, and then he transitioned to the CIA, and he actually ended up working as a counterterrorism agent, protecting CIA directors, high-level stuff. So he had top-secret clearances and everything.
So he was deep in the system.
He was in the system. He was very much a part of that world.
Okay, so how did he end up becoming a whistleblower?
Well, there was a moment, kind of a turning point for him. He was on assignment. I think it was somewhere near the Soviet Union.
Oh.
And a woman approached him and asked him about Jesus. And this really shook him, made him question his role in this whole intelligence apparatus. And this ultimately led to him leaving the CIA.
Okay, that's an interesting story.
It is, yeah. It's a personal thing, right?
Yeah.
It makes you think about your own values and stuff like that.
Right.
But then it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
So Shipp discovers a security flaw within the CIA that could actually expose covert agents.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
A big deal, right. So he reports this like any good employee would do, whistleblower type stuff.
Yeah.
And the CIA basically tries to silence him. They actually even try to discredit him, saying he was mentally unstable.
Oh, wow.
The whole 9 yards, right.
They pulled out all the stops.
They did. But thankfully, the Department of State actually came to his defense.
Okay.
And rebuked the CIA. So there's this whole battle going on behind the scenes.
So it's not just some rogue agent going off on his own. This is like high level.
No. This is the system fighting back,
Yeah.
It's trying to protect its secrets and its power.
Okay, so it sounds like Shipp paid a price for speaking out. What happened to him?
Well, he claims he was retaliated against pretty severely. He says he was forced to live in a house that was contaminated with toxins and mold, and as a result, he and his family suffered from serious health problems.
Wow.
Now, whether or not all that's true is up for debate.
Right.
But it's pretty disturbing stuff.
So with that background, how does Shipp connect all of this to MKUltra?
Right, okay, so Shipp believes that MKUltra, which the CIA says was active for 20 years?
Yeah, the 50s to the 70s, I think.
Right. He doesn't think it ever actually stopped.
So he thinks it's still going on.
He does. He believes it's still going on, but in a more covert way.
Yeah.
Probably under different names, different programs.
Makes
Except it's not, but the goals are the same.
Okay.
Control.
And how does that tie into what we were just talking about, with the CIA trying to silence him?
Well, it kind of paints this picture of an agency that's willing to do whatever it takes.
Right.
To protect its secrets, to maintain control, even if it means harming its own people or manipulating the public.
Okay, so we're talking about a very powerful, secretive organization.
Exactly. And this is where Shipp's claims about MKUltra start to get really interesting or disturbing, depending on how you look at it.
Okay, so let's hear it. How does he connect MKUltra to specific events?
Well, he starts with the JFK assassination.
Okay, that's a big one.
It is. And he makes some bold claims. He believes that Lee Harvey Oswald the alleged assassin,
Right.
was recruited by the CIA and that he was, get this, programmed using MKUltra techniques.
So he's saying Oswald was basically a mind-controlled assassin.
That's exactly what he's saying. And he even points to a photograph taken right after the assassination that allegedly shows a known CIA operative
Whoa.
at the scene.
That's pretty wild.
It is, right. And Shipp goes on to say that the official narrative of, the lone gunman and all that is a complete cover-up.
Okay, so he's basically challenging the entire history of what we know about JFK's assassination.
He is. He's saying we've been lied to.
Wow. That's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it is. It is. But we're just getting started.
Okay, so if MKUltra was involved in the JFK assassination, what else does Shipp think it was used for?
Well, he also claims that the CIA saw Martin Luther King Jr. as a threat because of his stance against the Vietnam War and his growing influence in the civil rights movement.
Right.
Shipp suggests they considered him a dangerous communist.
Wow.
Yeah, and he goes so far as to say that the CIA orchestrated MLK's assassination, again, using MKUltra to create a patsy, a scapegoat.
So the same playbook as with Oswald and JFK.
Essentially. Shipp sees a pattern here.
A pattern of using mind control to eliminate perceived threats.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see where he's going with this, but I gotta say, this is some pretty heavy stuff.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's a lot to take in.
And we haven't even gotten to Oklahoma City or 9/11 yet.
No, we haven't. Those are coming up next.
All right, well, I guess we better buckle up.
Yeah, strap yourself in. This is where it gets really wild.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive, everyone. We're picking up where we left off with Kevin Shipp's explosive claims about MKUltra.
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting.
So last time we talked about Shipp's belief that MKUltra was used in both the JFK and MLK assassinations.
Right. Very controversial stuff.
I mean, seriously. But it doesn't stop there.
Nope.
He goes on to connect it to the Oklahoma City bombing.
Right. The 1995 bombing.
With Timothy McVeigh.
Right. Now, Shipp, he claims that McVeigh, the guy who was convicted of the bombing, was actually an MKUltra subject.
Hold on. So he's saying McVeigh was brainwashed into carrying out this attack.
Essentially, yeah. And this is where Shipp's claims really start to push the boundaries of what's believable.
I can imagine. What evidence does he offer to support this claim?
Well, he points to some inconsistencies in the official investigation. He says that there were other bombs in the building.
Wait, what?
That's what he claims. That there were other bombs in the building that weren't accounted for. Evidence that was supposedly suppressed.
So he's suggesting a much larger conspiracy, more than just McVeigh acting alone.
Exactly. He believes there were other players involved, other forces at work.
Okay, and where does MKUltra fit into all of this?
Well, Shipp believes that McVeigh was programmed, conditioned to carry out the bombing, and then to take the fall for it.
So he was a patsy, like Oswald.
Right. Another scapegoat. And the real masterminds, whoever they were, got away clean.
It's starting to feel like a broken record, isn't it? This whole MKUltra playbook, programmed assassin, patsy, cover-up.
It does seem to be a recurring theme in Shipp's worldview.
Okay, so we've got JFK, MLK, Oklahoma City. But Shipp goes even further, right? He connects MKUltra to 9/11.
He does. And this is where things get really, really controversial.
I can imagine.
Shipp, based on his experience as a counterterrorism agent, he's convinced that 9/11 was an inside job.
Wow.
He believes that there was some kind of, I guess, a powerful entity, maybe within the U.S. government, that intentionally allowed the attacks to happen.
And he thinks MKUltra played a role in this.
Well, he doesn't explicitly say that MKUltra was used to, program the hijackers or anything.
Right.
But he does imply that the whole thing was a carefully orchestrated event, potentially using techniques similar to those employed in MKUltra.
To manipulate people, to control the narrative.
That's his suggestion. He points to inconsistencies in the official narrative, evidence that was supposedly ignored or suppressed.
This is getting pretty deep. So he's basically saying that the 9/11 attacks were a false flag operation.
That's essentially what he's arguing. And he believes that this operation was carried out to achieve certain geopolitical goals, to justify wars in the Middle East, to increase surveillance, to restrict civil liberties.
Wow, okay. This is a lot to process.
It is. And it's important to remember that Shipp's claims about 9/11 are highly controversial, rejected by most mainstream experts.
Right. And even Shipp himself admits that he doesn't have all the answers.
Right, he doesn't claim to have definitive proof.
Yeah.
But he believes that the evidence points to something much darker, much more sinister than what we've been told.
Okay, so we've talked about how Shipp connects MKUltra to all these major events. But he also talks a lot about media manipulation.
He does, yeah. And that's a big part of his whole theory of control.
So how does he see the media fitting into all of this?
Well, Shipp believes that the media is complicit in covering up the truth about MKUltra and other covert operations.
So he's saying the media is part of the problem, not the solution.
That's his contention. He claims that journalists are either consciously or unconsciously controlled by intelligence agencies.
How so? How would they control the media?
Well, Shipp points to a program called Operation Mockingbird, a real CIA program from the 1970s.
Yeah, I've heard of that. It was about using journalists to spread propaganda, right?
That's right. And Shipp believes that Mockingbird never really ended.
Hold on. So he's saying that the CIA is still secretly controlling the media.
That's what he believes. He says that journalists are often given incentives, access to sources, exclusive stories, career advancement, in exchange for promoting the CIA's agenda.
So it's like a quid pro quo, a system of rewards and punishments.
Exactly. And Shipp claims that those who don't play ball, who try to expose the truth, often face consequences.
Like what happened to him when he tried to expose that security flaw?
Right. He claims the Washington Post reported him to the CIA after he contacted them.
So he sees his own experience as proof that the media is compromised.
Yeah, that's his view. And he goes on to say that this control over the media is essential for maintaining the illusion of democracy, for keeping the public in the dark about what's really going on.
It's a pretty bleak picture he's painting.
It is. But Shipp argues that it's a reality we need to face if we want to break free from this system of control.
So we've gone pretty deep down this MKUltra rabbit hole.
Yeah, we have. Quite a journey.
I mean, we've covered assassinations, bombings, 9/11, media manipulation.
It's a lot to take in. It really is.
It really is. And I gotta say, it's kind of unsettling, you know?
I understand that. I mean, it's one thing to hear about these conspiracy theories, but to actually dive into them, to consider the evidence, it can be a bit overwhelming.
It is. I mean, if Shipp's right,
Right.
then the world is a much darker place than we thought.
It certainly challenges our perception of reality.
Absolutely.
you
But
know.
okay, so let's say for a moment that Shipp's right.
Okay.
What can we do about it?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what can we do as individuals when faced with such a powerful and pervasive system of control?
Yeah, do we just give up?
Shipp wouldn't say that. He believes that awareness is the first step. It's like once you see the strings, you can't unsee them.
Right, I guess so.
And that awareness can be empowering.
Okay, but how?
Well, Shipp, he talks a lot about critical thinking.
Right.
He says we need to question everything. Don't just accept the official narrative,
Yeah. But where do we even start?
Well, he suggests looking for patterns, inconsistencies in official stories. Do your own research. Don't just rely on mainstream media outlets.
But we need to become our own investigators.
In a way, yes,
It sounds pretty daunting.
it can be. But there are resources out there, Independent media, alternative news sources. The key is to diversify your information intake.
Okay. So we need to be more skeptical, more discerning about the information we consume.
Exactly. And Shipp also emphasizes the importance of community, of connecting with like-minded people, sharing information, supporting each other.
So it's not just about individual awareness, but collective action.
Right. Because at the end of the day, the only way to counter this system of control, this manipulation,
Yeah.
is through a collective awakening, through a critical mass of people who see through the illusion and demand something better.
I mean, that's a powerful message.
It is, and it's a call to action.
So even if we don't agree with everything Shipp says,
Right.
I think he's given us a lot to think about.
He has.
Yeah.
He's challenged us to look at the world in a new way.
To question our assumptions, to be more critical of the information we're given.
And ultimately to take responsibility for our own understanding of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great place to leave it. Until next time, stay curious and keep questioning.
If you enjoyed this episode of While We Were Distracted, be sure to watch the video that inspired it. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It really helps.